So as George said, I'm PhilRozeboom. I am the IPM coordinator. My bio said I did do research. That's not true. I still do it. So I was Adam Varenhorst. He's the PI for the red sunflower seed weevil, the lead on that research project. He's the one that put together all these slides and did all the research on it, as well as the statistical analysis on that. So I worked for him as a research associate, doing all of his research projects, his field tech basically. Became the IPM coordinator, and I still do all that stuff. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy what I do. So the first thing we'll cover is a few of the studies we did this year in the red sunflower seed weevil. And then I'll cover two other insects just briefly, because the red sunflower seed weevil, there's a lot to cover with that. I'll cover grasshoppers and the deck stem borer. All right, so the red sunflower seed weevils, they're annual pests in South Dakota sunflower, as I'm sure you guys know. Severe infestations can result in a 50 to 80% of the achenes being infested. And of course, those larvae, they feed on those seeds, those developing seeds. And in most cases, with pretty much every insect, it's primarily managed using a foliar insecticide. So life cycle, just very basic, the life cycle of this. They only have one generation per growing season per year. So they emerge in spring as beetles. They overwinter down in that soil. And then once you reach a certain accumulation of temperature and daylight, growing degree days, that's when they emerge out of that soil. Emerge out in spring, mate on the sunflower. So it's a little blurry on the slide here, but you can see here's a really severe infestation that we had this year. And I have bigger versions of these pictures a little later. But they'll mate on the sunflower. The females will lay the eggs in that sunflower. The larvae will feed on those seeds, those achenes. They drop from the head in the fall, and then they overwinter as larvae, kind of like in a little cocoon in that soil. And that's where they pupate. So that's where they go from larval form to adult form. And then, of course, that cycle continues. So the problem, it started in 2018, I believe, or 17, I don't remember, all blurs together. But the field outbreaks were 10 to 100 times over threshold. The threshold is 4 to 6 weevils, adult weevils per head. And this is one of our earlier pictures we took that very first year at Dakota Lakes. We were seeing around 300 to 400 weevils, adult weevils per head at that time. And we started getting our first reports of field failures where producers went out, they applied that insecticide, they went out a day or a couple days later and they still had, a lot of weevil adults in their sunflower. So here's that picture I showed a little earlier. So this was taken, the truck stop on 14 in 83. If you head north on 83 from that truck stop from 14, the very first gravel road, take a left, head west, 5 to 10 miles. That's where this sunflower field was. And we were seeing thousands per head. We go out and sample these weevils, put them in a bucket, and then we do our vial assays, which I'll discuss a little later. This field took me 2 minutes. Normally we need about 800 weevils out of one field, and that can take up to 4 hours to get those, depending on population. This field took me 2 minutes. So I just chopped the whole head off, threw them in the bucket, and I was done. Here's a picture of a head. So this dark red, you might think that's florites. That's all weevil adults, just all over in that sunflower head. And I don't think this will play, but this is a video. This is once I got back to campus, there were so many inside that bucket. It's a 5-gallon bucket that we store the weevils in to transport them. There are so many in there that you could there's a humming sound coming from that bucket. We've never had that before. I would estimate like 20,000 weevils just in that one bucket. And that was from, I think, 5 sunflower heads that we, took from the field. I think it did play a little bit. Oh, well. So this is from our very first spray trial that we did at Dakota Lakes, very preliminary. We really weren't sure, what was happening at the time. And all these weevils here, they're all dead on the top of that sunflower head. So we did kill a bunch, but we were still well above that 4 to 6 weevils per sunflower head. And this is when we first saw them, that 300 to 400 weevils per head. So the problem, well, first off, our most common form of management for insects, foliar insecticides. There's 29 insecticides labeled for management. 29 of them are pyrethroid active ingredients. And that's a problem because with IPM and just in general, you want as many active ingredients or modes of action as possible. Otherwise, you start developing resistance. So failures, 2017 and on. We saw failures, reported failures. And then we did reduce susceptibility research in 2020 and 2021. That's where we can scientifically say that we have reduced susceptibility. And large populations persist, as I just showed in those past few pictures. And keep in mind, that is the worst field we've ever seen. Typically, we have, 100 to 200 in a bad field. Mild fields, will have 50. Keep in mind that's, well above 4 to 6 weevils per head still. But that thousands per head, that was the absolute worst we saw. So our reduced susceptibility experimental design, we had 4 different treatments. Acetone, so that helps the chemical stick to the side of a vial. So it's a vial assay. We put weevils into the vial, check them 24 and 48 hours later, and count the number dead. So we had 4 treatments. We did have a 5th, 7, but it performed so poorly that we just cut it out entirely after our first few bioassays. And as I mentioned, we collected adults on the onset of flowering. This year we did 28 locations in South Dakota, ranging from Dakota Lakes Research Farm all the way up to North Dakota on 83 Canning Road. We did some on 212, 14, 1804, and then Patrick Wagner, he's based out of Rapid City. He's our entomologist out there. He sampled a few fields out West River as well. So that 5-gallon bucket, we take it back to campus, let it sit for 24 hours, and then we take 20 adults and put 20 adults per vial after 24 hours after collection, and then we evaluated them 24 hours after we placed them into vials, either alive or dead. So here's this picture. This year, since we did so many, or we were able to do so many more locations because we bought some vacuum pumps this year. Before, we would take a tweezers or your fingers and just do 1 weevil at a time, 20 per vial, and 30 vials per location. So you can imagine that took a very long time to do. This year with the vacuum pump, and we verified the vacuum pump, the pressure was low enough where it didn't kill them when it sucked them into the vial. But it took us 10 minutes compared to like 4 hours for a location. So that really helped us, and we'll continue to use that this coming year, or this year. So here's a picture of all the locations we sampled. Red is this year, 2022. Yellow is last year in 2021. And as you can see, all of these are the ones that Patrick Wagner sampled. And then all of these are the ones that we did. Resistance-wise, this is where we see most of it. There are a few locations missing along 1804 here. Adam must forgot to put them in. The field that I showed you the pictures of was about right there. That's where those thousands per head sunflower were. So as you can see, Dakota Lakes all the way up Canning Road, 83 there is where we primarily focused. A lot of that was, we just drive around looking for sunflower fields, and it's kind of luck of the draw if you find any. So, if you go further east, you really start running out of sunflowers to sample. So that's why it ends there for the most part. So here's our first graph showing our results. Corrective mortality is on the left there, and what that does is it takes the control, the one with just the acetone, so there's no chemical in it, and it compares that to our 3 different treatments. Anything below a 0.9, 90% is considered reduced susceptibility. Asana XL is our esfenvalerate, still pyrethroid. Warrior 2 is our lambda cyhalothrin. That's what most of the products out there are, lambda cyhalothrin. And then Asana XL with Exponent. Now Exponent is a synergist, so it helps that chemical basically overcome the resistance from the insect. And as you can see here, it did work in the vial assays. Spray trial, we don't have the data done on that yet, so I won't be showing that. It didn't work quite as well, and that could just be due to coverage of the sunflower. But anyway, there's Potter County. There's 3 fields that we sampled in Potter County. Asana XL had a significant difference from the control, or significant difference corrected mortality. So it was less than 0.9, meaning too many of them survived. Same with Warrior 2, and then Asana XL Exponent was above that 0.9. There was no reduced susceptibility with that. So Exponent, in that case, it did work. Hughes County, 7 fields pooled together. Asana XL was still significantly different. Warrior 2 was as well. And then again, XL and Exponent mixed together. It wasn't significantly different. It wasn't reduced susceptibility. Hyde County, just 1 location. None of them were significantly different. There was no reduced susceptibility. In this case, those pyrethroids did their job. Buffalo County, Asana and Warrior 2 were significantly different. Asana and XL, or the XL Exponent, was not. Stanley County, 3 fields pooled together. In this case, we had all 3 had reduced susceptibility, so we had too many survive for that. And in this case, the Exponent did not help XL in that case. Hacking County, again, just had no reduced susceptibility, so we had a decent kill on those weevils. Lyman County, Asana and Warrior, pretty significant reduced susceptibility with that. Bennett County, same thing, Asana XL, Warrior 2, reduced susceptibility. And then Meade County, that's out west, that didn't have any at all. Reason being, there's not a lot of sunflower out there, so those populations, the ones that are out there, they're not intermixing with our resistant population in this area. Pennington County, same, they had some resistance as well. So our 2022 conclusions, we did have reduced susceptibility to both pyrethroids, your lambda cyhalothrin, which is your Warrior 2, and which is most of the products out there. Then esfenvalerate, your Asana XL had reduced susceptibility. Then that Exponent, Adam put together kind of the results for that, and it did increase mortality 10 to 15% compared to just the esfenvalerate, the Asana XL alone. For this coming year, of course, we plan to do the same thing for the most part, but we will be testing new chemistries that are not labeled in sunflower. We're able to do that, and it's a good way to just get an idea what might work, what could work down the road. So we'll be looking into that this year. So this next one, the experimental design, so this next one is dose response. It's the same thing, we still use vials, but it's done in a different way in that we're able to tell if we have resistance. So what we do is you start with a very low dose and you work your way up to a very high dose. The ones highlighted in yellow, that is your label rate. That is what is on the label, what you should apply if you see weevils out in your field. So for Warrior 2, it's 13.35, for Asana XL, 21.18. And basically what the scale allows us to do is to see what is the appropriate rate to kill a weevil. And that allows us to find out if it is resistant to that chemical or not. So there's 3 treatments with 6 doses per chemical. Of course, acetone, that's our control. And the Warrior 2, your various rates here. And Asana XL with your various rates there. And then this one too, here's our acetone mixture rates. We did a scale on that as well. So just like the vial assay, we do this study at the exact same time. Adults were collected at the onset of flowering. 20 adults were placed in the vials 24 hours after collection, so we let them rest in the lab for 24 hours. And then we evaluated them after 24 hours in those vials, counted number live or number dead. So this graph, some explaining to do. So this is Asana XL, so remember 21 is the labeled rate. That's where you should apply and see, complete death of those weevils. Yellow is your LD50, so that is your lethal dose to kill 50% of the population at label rate. LD90 is where you want yellow to, sorry, I'm confusing myself. 21 is the label rate. LD50 should kill, is 50% of the population dies with that label rate. LD90 is how you should kill 90% of them at that label rate. So as you see, North Dakota, there is no resistance at all. Here's the label rate, that max label rate, and we had nearly 100% death there. The LD90, is well below that 21. In Hughes County, LD50, it did okay, or, pretty well. We killed 50% of the population. It's well below that 21 red. But our LD90, at the very top here, that number, 253, that's the theoretical rate you would have had to apply to kill that insect population. So we applied at 21, and we didn't kill all of them. You would have had to apply at 253 to kill that entire population. So that's highly resistant. Hyde County, LD50 was below, but our LD90 again was way above that 21. Sully County, LD50 below, but again the LD90 much above that 21 rate. And that was in 2021. In 2022, we kind of saw the same thing. The West River Research Field Station had no resistance. That's out by Sturgis, northeast of Sturgis. North Dakota, again, had no resistance. Dakota Lakes Research Farm, we had a decent kill. It was nearly or practically right at that 21, so it did all right. Hughes County, no control whatsoever. So you would have had to apply 1,280 instead of 21 in order to kill 100% of that population. Warrior 2 in 2021, North Dakota again well below. Hughes County had heavy resistance to Warrior 2 with that LD90. Hyde County, very resistant to Warrior 2. That's that lambda cyhalothrin. Sully County, highly resistant as well. In 2022, North Dakota didn't. West River Research Field Station did not. Dakota Lakes did, again, 953. In Hughes County, 1,097. So again, in 2022, we saw heavy resistance. So what resistance ratios are, this is how we definitively say if a population is resistant or not. So we take our test population, so like those weevils from that bucket that I showed you earlier, and divide it by the known susceptible population. That would be our North Dakota population, since they did not have any reduced susceptibility or resistance up there. If you have a resistance ratio less than 5, the population is susceptible. 5 to 10, population is moderately resistant, and greater than 10, your population is highly resistant, that ratio. So here's a table showing our values. In 2021, Hughes County, Exana XL had a resistance ratio of 26. So 10 or more is resistant, and we were at 26. Warrior 2, 81. Hyde County, Asana had 56. Warrior 2, 229. Solid County, Asana XL, 99. Warrior 2, 157. The West River Field School or research field in 2022, Asana had 6. Warrior 2 at 4. So Asana, according to that resistance ratio, we did have slight resistance out there as well. Warrior 2, 4, susceptible. Dakota Lakes, Asana XL 13, Warrior 2 at 40. And then Hughes County, Asana XL at 70. So we saw an increase from previous years. Warrior 2 at 293, a sharp increase from 2021. So with those resistance ratios in those graphs I showed you, we have confirmed resistance in South Dakota to Asana XL and Warrior 2. Asana XL being the S-Ven valerate and Warrior 2 being your lambda-cyhalothrin, both pyrethroids. The resistance ratios were higher for Warrior 2, as you just saw. And we continue to fight very large red sunflower seed weevil populations, as you saw in that picture. In most cases, I think sampling fields was pretty easy. Almost every field we went into, and it was just completely random, was 100 weevils per head or more. So emergence of red sunflower seed weevils and entry into fields. We think many fields sprayed in 2022 were done before the peak population showed up. And, that's producers sprayed when they were supposed to, 4 to 6 weevils per head. But there was just such a large influx after that spray that it didn't really matter. So that really heavy field that I showed you, they actually sprayed that field, and then we went out, I believe, a week and a half after they sprayed, and that's when we still saw, those thousands per head, because they are highly mobile. We are planning to do a flight test using a flight mill, so we can accurately tell how far red sunflower seed weevils can fly, how mobile they are. That's something that we plan to do this coming year. So hopefully with that data, we can more accurately predict, how far they can fly based off of that. So 2022 conclusions: avoid Warrior 2, Asana XL. 7 is a carbamate. It's very similar to organophosphate. And like I said earlier, that one just didn't work at all, so we just cut it out in some of our vial assays. And Mustang Max, that was determined in previous years that we didn't show, but it had the same reduced susceptibility as the others. A synergist exponent did increase the Asana XL in the lab. But again, it was only 10 to 15%, and there were some cases where it didn't produce a significant difference. We do have a field trial at Dakota Lakes Research. That's our spray trial. We won't be showing that now. I'm actually still working on that sunflower. I was working on it last week. But we had to hand harvest that and hand process that, and then we have to ship it up to North Dakota so they can analyze the seed. That's still being done. But once we get that, hopefully, we'll get some good data from that field trial as well, that spray trial. So 2023, some alternatives to pyrethroids. Working on section 18 for new chemistry. We did look at one chemistry in the lab this past year that did show promising results. We're not going to show that yet because it's very preliminary, so it's not analyzed scientifically yet, but it did show promising results, and hopefully we can expand on that in 2023. So our next study that we did, trying to see, we're just kind of throwing the kitchen sink at this, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. We did a altering planting date study at Dakota Lakes. Based off of some preliminary research done in the 1980s in North Dakota. It demonstrated effectiveness of early planting on reducing that red sunflower seed weevil damage in your sunflower head. But of course, that was, in the 80s in North Dakota. A lot of things change. South Dakota's climate is different than North Dakota. It was almost 40 years ago, so that's why we're trying to do it now. So experimental designs, we had 2 different sunflower varieties, and then 3 different planting dates at the Dakota Lakes Research Farm. We had 3 planting dates, but we included a 4th planting date on May 16. Sam, he planted one extra variety on May 16th. We wanted to plant our 2 varieties there. We just couldn't make it out there in time. We couldn't line up a truck to haul our tractor and planter out in a timely manner. So we used May 16th is a different variety than these 3 dates, but we included it anyway since it's such a preliminary study. And then we had 4 planting dates at the West River Research Farm out at Sturgis, and then there's our planting dates there. So preliminary results on May 16th, here's an X-ray scan of 100 seeds. Any discoloration, so I believe right there is damaged by the weevil. I think there's a seed right there as well. On May 16th, we had a 1% damage to the seeds there out of 100, so 1 out of 100. On May 27th, it went up 23% damage. You can see your seeds here are the damaged ones. On June 3rd, 51% damage. You can see there's a lot more discoloration amongst those seeds. June 17th, 96% damage, so nearly practically every seed had weevil damage. We don't have data from Sturgis. They're still processing the seed hand harvest, so we don't have data from that. But we don't expect it to be nearly as severe as Dakota Lake stuff. So what preliminary planting date conclusions we got? Early planting dates had reduced damage, 1% to 96%, pretty big difference. Sunflower, our recommendation, sunflower should be planted as early as possible in 2023. Based off of all the research we've done, our existing products can't really be relied on reliably for management. And then sometime around or before May 16th is likely the ideal target. That's difficult, but if you can, it's something to think about. So that was our red sunflower seed weevil. Our three results from our 3 different studies that we did. Now I'll kind of change gears and cover the last 2 insects that we think you should keep an eye out on. So not nearly as extensive. We haven't done any research on this. This is just kind of basic information. So our long-horned borer, so that's what the adult looks like. It's kind of a large beetle with long antenna, gray in color with black and white stripes on its antenna. They're about 5/8 long gray beetles, very long antenna. The larvae, they're about 1/3 to 1/2 inch long. They have a brown head and a cream colored body, and you'll find them in your sunflower stalks. Hence, Decti stem borer. So larvae, they bore into the stalk, and they girdle the stalk at the base and overwinter. So you can see here, right down the center of that sunflower stem is where that borer was, and I believe the larva is right there. It's pretty hard to see. But the injury is from girdling and not feeding. They do not, the feeding does not cause the damage to it. What causes the damage is lodging of that sunflower. They go into that stem, and if you have a sunflower variety or really high planting population, usually that stem, the epidermis, isn't as thick as something where you have a lower plant population or a variety with bigger, thicker stems. So ones with a low plant population or larger stems are able to tolerate your Decti stem borer damage a lot more easily. So as I just showed, that girdling, slender stems girdle sooner because of that borer, but also dry conditions plus those slender stems equals earlier lodging, which, you know, drought-wise, it hasn't been great the past couple of years. So with those thinner stems, they're more susceptible to that decty stem borer damage. So some management you can do to avoid loss due to the decty stem borer. You can do that delayed planting. Hopefully you get those sunflowers, those stems get thicker by the time, you know, those decty show up. Lower planting populations, basically the less dense that stand is, the larger those sunflowers can be, individual sunflower, so that stem will be thicker. Hate to say it, but fall tillage, since they overwinter in that stem, I mean, that's, you know, last case, but if they overwinter in that stem, if you disturb that stem, rip that apart, you can destroy those decty stem borer larvae. Or a prompt harvest of infested fields. So you can get out there if you know you have damage. If you can get out there earlier before your sunflower lodges, the better. And actually we're seeing decty stem borer in soybean in the southeast part of South Dakota, causing pretty much the exact same issues and same recommendations to them. If you have decties, you know, try to harvest as early as you can. All right, so last insect, grasshoppers, they were an issue in several areas in 2020, 2021, and 2022. The falls were favorable, so the frost was pretty late in those years. It stayed warm for, you know, a decent amount of time. And then grasshoppers, they do really well when it's dry. And of course, 2020, 2022, or 2021, 2022 are obviously pretty dry. And these guys, you know, they're causing an issue pretty much everywhere. So we have a lot of damage of grasshoppers at the Beersford farm this year. You could just barely walk down the road and you'd have a swarm of them jumping out in front of you. So here's a picture. This was our red sunflower seed weevil spray trial that we were going to do in 2020. And this was just north of Dakota Lakes on Canyon Road on the east side of the road. And as you can see, there are no leaves on these sunflower. Reason being, since we wanted our weevils to be out there, we didn't spray. If we sprayed, well, who knows, maybe the weevils would have survived anyway. But we didn't want to, you know, spray and kill those weevils because in the study we wouldn't be able to do. Well, regardless, they ate all the leaves and then they started eating the heads as well. We didn't get a picture of it, but they would actually remove sections of the head. That's the worst we've ever seen it. Here's an example of two striped grasshoppers. In 2021, when we were looking for weevils, we did notice a sunflower field and we talked to the producer. He had to replant the first 100 feet of a sunflower field because the grasshoppers knocked that edge out so severely that he had to replant it. So 2023 prediction for grasshoppers, because of the droughts and the late hard frost, you know, we had a lot of grasshoppers this year. They laid a lot of them are overwintering in the soil and they're probably going to survive. All the snow cover as well will insulate them, keep them warmer in that soil so you have less die off during the winter. We're likely to see large populations this year. And depending on spring conditions, you know, if it gets warmer a little earlier, they'll be out pretty early. And those nymphs, grasshoppers, they can chew down a lot of green material as well. If you do have to spray for grasshoppers, there are quite a few insecticides labeled for them. Keep in mind the threshold for nymphs, so your early little guys, it's 30 to 45 nymphs per square yard. It's 30 to 45 per square yard, the range, because of course they're not going to stay still. So just kind of envision a yard, and if you fall within that range, it's time to spray because you know they'll jump out and they'll be moving, so it's hard to count. Adults, of course, they're bigger. They're going to eat a lot more material. They're about 8 to 14 adults per square yard. So down in Beersford, you know, we definitely was in that threshold. We didn't spray because it's a spray trial we were looking at gall midge and soybean aphid. So it was what it was. So, and this is not species dependent. There are multiple different species. Doesn't matter what they are, you can count them all the same. So with that, our funding sources, the NSA and South Dakota Oilseeds Council, that's for the red sunflower seed weevil. You know, we couldn't do this research without their help, without their funding. Here's some required slides we have to show. Here's my contact information. I don't have an office number anymore, mainly because I'm just never in the office, especially during the summertime. So if you have any questions, you can just send an email to me here, philip.rozeboom@sdstate.edu. Patrick Wagner, he's our West River guy based out of Rapid City. He's the one that does all the West River sampling. There's his email and his office number. And then Adam Varenhorst, like I mentioned earlier, he is the principal investigator. He's the one that put together a proposal for this grant. You know, got the funding, does the analysis. He's basically the head guy. So there's his office number and then his email address. So if you have any questions, this coming year, he's definitely a guy to contact. I also like to mention our extension website here, extension.sdstate.edu. Throughout the summer months, every week, every Monday, we put out a pest and crop newsletter. And as I'm out sampling, looking for insects, we put out traps, we do sweep nets in pretty much all the crops, corn, soybean, wheat, some sunflower, canola, all of it. We put out an article, if we see an insect and we think it might be a problem developing, we'll put an article in that newsletter in a timely manner. So if you guys want to go to that website, check out that newsletter, you'll be most up to date basically on what we see. And of course, if you let Adam know, you have a problem, he'll send me out or Pat out. We'll look at your problem and, it'll probably be an article so everyone else will kind of get that information as well. So with that, any questions?
What do they do? What does Decties do to a soybean? Like, because they have such a small stem, so how does that?
Yep, so I can show you a picture on my phone. I went out late September down to Yankton and then went west a couple miles. Last year it was just spotty parts of a soybean field. This year it was entire soybean fields, but it looks just like the sunflower. So the larvae, of course, they're smaller, still is the exact same species, but they'll do the same thing. They'll girdle that stem. And yeah. So it's quite a bit smaller, the larva is. But it was surprising. They would go from the bottom of the stem nearly to the top. Sometimes they girdle the entire stem. So, and I can show you pictures of that too. But
there was a guy that called me a number of years ago, and he said that he was from somewhere down in the southeast. He said they were using sunflowers as a trap crop for Decties to prevent it from getting to the soybeans inside the field. Like they
on the edge.
Around the edge.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's we're actually Adam put together a research proposal with Jonathan Kleinjohn. He's the wheat expert pretty much. So we're going to be looking into that issue-wise. We have not seen Decties in soybean, or at least haven't been reported or notified of Decties really being anywhere but the southeast part of South Dakota. Kind of like gall midge is really only in that southeast part.
Why wouldn't they hit our soybeans if they're here for the sunflowers? Like, to me, why would they differentiate?
Good question.
Yeah.
I've seen it myself when we've had them bad in our soybeans before.
Okay.
Have you?
We don't raise very many soybeans.
Well, and that could be it too. But I've noticed 5-6 years. Was it concerning? Like, did you just see them? Did they cause pretty significant damage? Yeah, lodged over. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'll definitely add them know. We can expand, that reach. Yep. Well, and like gall midge too. You guys definitely have them here as well in our soybean, but not nearly as Never see them. Yep. Any other questions? Anything about the LD50, LD90? That stuff's a little confusing to me yet, but yeah. Oh,
I just wondered, between South Dakota and North Dakota, are there some basic differences in management that led to the issues that we have here versus not in North Dakota?
Can you repeat those questions? So I can get
oh, sure. Yes, yes. So you asked, is there different management tactics used between North Dakota and South Dakota that makes a difference in your weevil resistance,
Right.
more or less?
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't think so.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Sorry, Phil, but,
Do you want the mic?
you know, no.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say that, like, for years I've driven up to, because I'm originally from out of Winnipeg. Their flowers are always flowering before ours, you know?
They are,
I-
yes,
it
they are
just shocked
earlier.
me when I came here and people are like, oh, I think I'll wait till after May long to plant my flowers. You grow up in the North Country and you don't have that option, right? You've got to plant early, like, and maybe that's one of the reasons that.
First of May.
First of May.
In my neighborhood,
Yeah,
they're planting
yeah,
flowers.
you don't
first week
have
of
the
May.
option because you don't have the fall
You
up
don't have
there.
the
It's the same growing up.
And we did see with
Manitoba.
our planting date, you know, the earlier you plant, the less damage you had. I mean, that was just one study, 1 year. But and it's funny you mentioned that because NDSU, we work with them, Janet and Patrick Boise. They're always texting or emailing us, hey, have you done this yet? It's like, no, we're nowhere close to where you guys are. So, and then you had a question as well?
I was just wondering, section 18, what kind of time frame are you looking at if that does get passed or not?
He asked the Section 18 timeframe on that, whether getting passed or not. I hate to say it, but that would be an excellent question for Adam.
Is it Quinazoline from Syngenta?
Yes, it is. Yep, Panazoline from Syngenta. Well, that's one of them. That's the one that worked really well in our vial assay, but I don't believe it's passed yet for use. So,
Right, but I just wondered what kind of time frame you're looking at.
yep, yeah, I guess I'm not entirely sure.
An answer on it.
Yep.
I mean, it's fungicides have shown to pay on sunflowers for spraying. Is that making the weevil situation worse by killing off the good fungi? You know?
He asked if using a fungicide basically kills off the good fungi, helping the weevil survive,
Right.
more or less. That I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if there is there a close relation between weevils and fungi? Or I guess,
Number one thing that kills all insects is fungi.
okay. So are there fungal spores that target weevil? I guess I'm not familiar with my fungi.
All insects get fungal diseases, and if you do something, just drop down the fungi, you increase insecticide. There's lots of studies on that.
Okay.
If you want, I'll send you all kinds of it.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So as Dwayne has answered, probably, most likely.
So besides planting early, you also recommended not to spray Warrior Asana.
Mm-hmm.
What about, like, you didn't show Potter County up there. I felt like the weevil situation was a lot less up here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think there?
For your insecticide.
Because it's gonna be pretty hard to go away from spraying insecticides.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Especially, I don't know, if guys can get Exponent this year, the Synergist, it seemed like it helped, so.
Yep.
Thoughts?
So he asked further north, like Potter County, if it's worth applying your Asana or Warrior 2 to see if it actually works, because the severity wasn't as bad up in the north. I guess it's a good question. I don't know. Data-wise, I don't know if I could say that for sure. You know, I don't know. It's a gamble.
But, I mean, the question is, are we better off just killing half the population and making it worse?
Well, and that's that is the thing. You do kill, like as you saw the LD50, that yellow bar, that was below our label rate every single time. it was at LD90 where, you know, it was way above that. So we did kill, you know, at 50% of that population every time. The bad thing about that is, I mean, that's how you create more resistance. You basically knock out that susceptible population, and all you're left with is more resistant, and you just, you know, those resistant ones start breeding more and more and more. I mean, that's why, like a refuge in a bag in corn with corn rootworm, you basically want some of that susceptible population in your corn of that corn rootworm to reduce the amount of resistant corn rootworm. Kind of the same principle. Research-wise, I don't think we're far enough into it to really say, you know, basic principle is sound, but without that definitive data, I don't know if I can give you a, you know, definitive answer. So,
Do they hatch like you can use that?
growing degree days?
Yes.
Yep. Yep. So,
And then another thing about Powder and Sully County is probably, there's a lot more soybeans up here, there's less flowers up here. There's still flowers, but nothing like Sully County and Hughes County.
yep. And that's that map I showed you. That's why we don't have as many locations sampled, because it's diminishing returns. You know, every mile you'll drive is time, and our goal is to try to get as many locations as possible. So once, you know, we start running out of sunflower, we basically stop sampling. So.
I had a question texted me, it's insecticide in furrow at planting, like capture or something, would that do anything to kill the weevils that are in the soil?
So yes, if Catcher LFR, a in-furrow insecticide would be able to kill those weevils. You'll have to remind me, what is the active ingredient for capture? Do you recall? Pyrethrin. So pyrethrin is basically pyrethroid. I don't think it would really work. If you're seeing, if you,
Would be in that field because it wouldn't have been a sunflower field.
that's true. Dwayne said weevils wouldn't be there because there wasn't sunflower in that field before.
Shouldn't be there.
Yeah, shouldn't be there because they do overwinter in that soil. So, you know, just like any insect, crop rotations keeps some of that insect pressure down in some
Do you have
cases.
any idea how far they fly?
No. So I mentioned that during the presentation. We have 3 different flight mills. It's a specialized instrument that has kind of like a motor and a very thin piece of wire with a little weight on one side, and then you attach a weevil to the other side, and basically you hook that up to a computer, and that weevil will fly in a circle until they rest, or, you know, they can't fly anymore. And if you do that enough times, you can get a good data set and find out how far those weevils are able to fly in one flight session. So we actually have had that equipment for 2 years. Just timing wise, these vial assay spray trial, we have like 2 to 3 weeks to do it. So we just always ran out of time. But we're working with North Dakota. They're also putting together a flight mill apparatus, and hopefully we'll get, you know, that data this year.
So they'll lay eggs and then move on?
No, the females mate once, lay eggs, and then
How long do they survive? Because obviously, you said it just keeps getting worse. Like, so if guys plant at the end of June, obviously it's still gonna get worse. When do they actually die?
so he asked, emergence gets worse over time, and when do they actually die, the adults?
Do they like have a lifespan of 60 days, or do they wait till it freeze and then die?
So it's freeze. So those adults, they will eat, or until food is no longer there. So adults do feed on pollen, and they're just weevil basically. Emergence-wise, they do emerge in spring, but and it is based on growing degree days, but each weevil is different. So that's why you see that gradient of emergence over time. So basically, for what we think might be happening, you know, you spray at 4 to 6 weevils, well, that's your first few emergence, and then a couple of weeks later, you have that giant influx. That's just when the majority of them emerge, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later. And then, you know, they're there, they lay eggs once, but they'll still be there until your first frost or so.
Any other questions?
Should we be planting flowers at the same time we're planting corn?
Sounds like it. Depends on when you plant your corn.
Can't get any corn planted.
I guess it depends on, you know, drought too. When we were sampling a lot of corn up here, it didn't look too good, so. And again, if you guys have any questions, you know, I'll be able to answer them as best I can. But Adam here, there's his phone number and email address. He's our PhD. He's our real expert on this stuff. So he's a real smart guy, and you know, he knows this stuff pretty good. So
Let's give him a round of applause.
thank you guys.